After the release of Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, the director has added another fantastic entry to his extended filmography. But where does the film rank in comparison to all the others? In this video, I'm going to be giving you my own ranking on the director's films, alongside sharing my thoughts on why I would position each at the spot it currently sits at. Of course, this is just my opinion towards it, and when it comes to Nolan specifically, I think the director hasn't made a bad film, even if a few of them do have clear weaknesses. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my upcoming content for Christopher Nolan's latest film, including more breakdowns and video essays, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, here is my current ranking of Christopher Nolan's films, including Oppenheimer. At the bottom spot on my list is Nolan's very first feature film, 1998's Following. Christopher Nolan's black and white debut is both his shortest movie at 69 minutes long and a blueprint-defining entry with the introduction of tropes that would go on to become hallmarks in his later event films. Starring Jeremy Theobald, we follow a young unemployed writer who finds himself partnering up with a slick thief who also recognisably goes by the name of Cobb. The film applies a fractured non-linear narrative, a Nolan-esque twist, and an intense score by the director's original composer, David Julian. A throwback to film noirs of the 40s and 50s, Following was an early sign that the inspired filmmaker was destined for great and bigger things. At the next spot is the 2002 remake of Insomnia. So Nolan's directorial trademarks are present in each of his films, but Insomnia is where they're at their most unrecognisable. This may be because it's both a remake of the Norwegian film of the same name and the only film Nolan didn't write himself. Still, Insomnia does feature great performances from Al Pacino as an LAPD detective haunted by guilt in pursuit of a creepy killer played by Robin Williams. As we learn when we watch the film, the more fatigued the protagonist gets, the more Nolan's themes and trademark imagery begin to emerge. It's definitely not to be slept on, and regardless of it coming in at a lower position on my list, it's still a fantastic entry that showcases the range of Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker. At number 10 is Nolan's previous theatrical movie, Tenet. Since its release, and after seeing the film many times, Tenet has gotten more intriguing every time I've seen it. At the same time though, I think the flaws of the movie have become more glaring, and that is why I've pushed it down a few places on my list. However, it's still a Nolan film that I love watching, and it does still highlight some of the best things about his filmmaking. It truly showcases his love for cinema through expressing his long-term affection for the spy genre and the blockbusters he grew up watching. It encapsulates his originality and theatricality to a T, alongside being an interrogation and experimental blockbuster that looks at his biggest questions surrounding time. It's the ultimate experiential film that captures the heart of the subjective experience, and through its intricate narrative and practicality, it's a film that transcends the laws of time. With great performances, sublime cinematography, and a pulse-pounding score from Ludwig Göransson, we get a modern puzzle box that is going to be debated amongst moviegoers for years to come, both in its quality and in its ideas. Just inside the top 10, I'm putting the final film in Nolan's iconic Batman trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises. For me, this is the film that is the most underrated in Nolan's filmography, one that has all the weight placed on it by the previous entry, and one which was overly compared. And that's because The Dark Knight Rises showed that Nolan could once again intertwine different genres into an already genre-defining comic book trilogy. The director infused his final Batman film with a greater sense of war and emotion to heighten the scale surrounding Bruce Wayne's conclusive journey. With memorable performances by Chris Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Tom Hardy, and Anne Hathaway, the film captures Batman, Gotham, and the people within the city at their most vulnerable, all while portraying the more militarized and physical dominance of the threat. That's of course up until The Dark Knight Rises, bringing the theme of rising from darkness into the very spotlight, a motif that began all the way back in Batman Begins. Coming in at number 8 is Nolan's first film in his Dark Knight trilogy, and that is Batman Begins. After 1997's Batman and Robin, Gotham's Crusader was in dire need of a big screen redesign. Thankfully, Christopher Nolan is just what was needed. This gritty and grounded neo-noir origin tale is exciting, thematically satisfying, and hugely successful. Not only can its influence be seen in many superhero films that came afterwards, but also in the many origin tales that were a part of other franchises too. It all amounts to one of the best live-action Batman movies, setting the groundwork for different genres and stories to be told with the character, as Christopher Nolan went on to do. At number 7 is Memento. Memento was only Nolan's second feature, and the story featured a former insurance investigator named Leonard Shelby attempting to find his wife's killer, all while battling short-term memory loss. It revealed a filmmaker on the main stage who was already confident in his abilities and gave us an idea of how he would use them down the line. You come for the performances by the brilliant ensemble cast, but you remember the film primarily for its ingenious puzzle that takes place over segments, partially sequenced in a backward structure. The imagery and ideas in Memento have inspired more recent films from the director, including time inversion in Tenet, and the use of subjective, objective, and black and white and colour in Oppenheimer. When watching the movie, you can see how influential it has been, and it's a great showcase of Nolan's character work, which has once again come into the spotlight with his latest movie. At the number 6 spot is 2006's The Prestige. The Prestige depicts a mental and physical battle between Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale's magicians in a game that becomes more and more personal. Like a lot of Nolan's work, it's a prime example of a film you want to watch again and again, not because you need to understand what's going on, but because of the clever details hidden throughout that took form in that initial script. It features one of the best performances of Hugh Jackman's career, and it's an emotionally satisfying movie in Nolan's filmography. In true Nolan fashion, we get a relatable portrayal of identity, rivalry, and obsession as the director executes his biggest magic tricks on the audience, ones that ask you whether you were actually watching closely. Reaching the top 5, I'm putting the Oscar-winning survival thriller Dunkirk. In 2017, we got Nolan expertly realising a monumental moment in history in a story about time, tension, and the human spirit. With a ticking score from Hans Zimmer and a three-way timeline structure of land, sea, and air, we get an augmented experience of survival, capturing the horrible moment where young men with no backstories just struggle to stay alive and eventually get back home. The film is a visual and technical behemoth that stresses on the desperation of the soldiers at Dunkirk with a powerful and emotional ending motif towards war. Dunkirk is a survival thriller that will be remembered amongst the greats and talked about for many years to come. Coming in at number 4 is the director's 2014 science fiction film Interstellar. It is one of Nolan's most visually stunning features thanks to cinematography by Hoyte van Hoytema, but it's also one of his most emotionally and narratively satisfying too. Interstellar continues to astound me every time I watch it, and its ambitious story of love, loss, space and time is everlasting. The physics in the film are mind-bending, the visual effects are outstanding, and it's a beautiful achievement of colliding abstract concepts with deeply intimate foundations. expectations. There's not many big screen blockbuster experiences as far-reaching as Interstellar, and it showcases Nolan's brilliant combination of mainstream and independent techniques, which feel extremely fitting given the plot of a stirring relationship and also evolution between a father and a daughter across space and time. Interstellar is just one of many examples that goes against that argument of Nolan's movies being cold, as he constructs big screen storytelling with just as much emotion as there is technical prowess. In the top 3 is the director's latest film, Oppenheimer. Right now, Oppenheimer has the same rating as the 2 films above it on my list, and over time and more watches, it could be my number 2 or even my number 1 Nolan film. But at this moment, having watched the film 3 times already in theatres, I place it at number 3, and I think it's one of the best movies that Nolan has ever directed. Like I said in my review last week, I was floored by how Nolan adapted the American Prometheus book, portraying the atomic bomb's creator in ways that stay true to what happened, but also expanding upon the material to get us more into the mind of Oppenheimer himself. We experience the moral dilemmas that he's faced with, we feel the impossibility of the whole situation, in that all the scientists had no choice but to build this weapon, and we understand the consequences that came afterwards. And within this is a film that, like Nolan's other work, has combined genres and merges the event film with something more intimate. There's drama, there's thrills, there's astonishing visuals, twisted romance, and all the horror surrounding this very important time in history. We also get astonishing performances across the board, whether it's Cillian Murphy's central role, Robert Downey Jr.'s Louis Strauss, Emily Blunt's Kitty, or countless others who at times only have a single scene. And add on the top tier approaches to filmmaking, whether it's Hoyte van Hoytema's intense cinematography, including new black and white IMAX, Ludwig Göransson's personal score using the sounds of a violin, or Jennifer Lame's precise editing. And in the end, while you get a film that harkens back to the detailed character work that Nolan focused on years ago, it is still pushed in new directions. I think it's a masterful film by the director, one that balances all the big and the small in movie making. I wouldn't be surprised if it does reach the top 2 on my list over time, but right now I give it the same score as those 2 films, being one of the very best in Christopher Nolan's filmography. Just missing out on the top spot is The Dark Knight. For me, this is the best live-action comic book movie of all time, the best movie that Batman has appeared in, and also one of the greatest blockbusters of the 21st century. While Batman Begins is focused on Bruce Wayne and his transformation into the Caped Crusader, The Dark Knight is about his reaction as a hero to the terror and chaos that the Joker brings to Gotham City. Heath Ledger's terrifying and sometimes humorous Oscar-winning performance has rightfully gone down in history as the greatest the superhero genre has ever seen. But it's not just this which makes The Dark Knight a classic, because the other performances are also top tier, the story is thrilling, the action set pieces are iconic, and the practical elevation by Nolan takes it all to new heights. With Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's powerful score, the film encapsulates a crime thriller that just so happens to be a Batman movie as well. It was relatable to the time, reflecting modern terrorism and uncertainty, giving the audience the ultimate real-world approach to a Batman film. Movies don't come much bigger or better than what Nolan did on The Dark Knight, and there's a reason it's still the blueprint and a comparison point for many other comic book films that release today. And at the number 1 spot on my list is Nolan's 2010 heist thriller, Inception. Like Oppenheimer and The Dark Knight, Inception is my highest rated Nolan film, sharing a score of 9.5 out of 10. And before Oppenheimer released, Inception and The Dark Knight have always flipped between my top 2 spots. Again, while this may change in the years ahead, especially as I rewatch both Oppenheimer and The Dark Knight, for now, Inception holds that top spot. Set within the architecture of the mind, Inception is original, cerebral, and blockbuster filmmaking at its very best. Nolan gradually eases you into the concepts of a familiar and unfamiliar world so that you understand just enough about the mechanics of dream thievery before things get out of control. The visuals and action set pieces elevate this through their jaw-dropping conception and execution. The movie also popularized Hans Zimmer's dramatic music and introduced us to the composer's finest work in his track Time. But what makes Inception so perfect is how it presents its story through all the emotional connections involving Leonardo DiCaprio's Cobb with getting home to his children and moving on from the death of his wife. The dream is also a motif for movie making itself, and that meta approach never becomes distracting. It's a film that sparks my imagination today just as much as it did over a decade ago when I first saw it, and in a similar way to Oppenheimer, I don't think I'll ever stop thinking about its ending. But that was my video ranking the films of Christopher Nolan, including Oppenheimer. Like I said, this is just my personal opinion towards how I would place the director's films, and I don't think that any of them can be labelled as bad films. But I'm very interested to see how you guys would rank them now that Oppenheimer is finally out. Let me know your list down below in the comment section, alongside your thoughts on the ranking I have shared in this video. For more breakdown and topical videos on Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.